what was the last game that you were excited for? Like, truly excited for? I know some people will say many great games, but now let me ask, how long ago was that? And why is it that now hype for games kind of comes and goes so sporadically? I mean, it's even safe to say that with those titles that we got excited about, there was a lot of the reverse. Not just from me, but from a lot of people. And I believe that all has to do with the modern state of gaming.
And I know for a fact there's gonna be someone in the comments saying,
"How dare you say that gaming is getting stale? Don't you play anything other than Nintendo? Because you'd see that there are so many amazing games."
settle down, Buster. The purpose of this video isn't to personally attack you or the games that you like. The point is just to talk about this feeling centered around modern AAA gaming. It's like there's this thing in the air, a feeling of dread when it comes to the new upcoming games. Or lack thereeof, I should say.
Quick, name an up-and-coming game that you're excited about. Chances are that it was either a remake, indie title, or you sat there with your mouth wide open waiting for a fly to enter. In my own recounting of the last game I had any amount of hype for, it had to be Spider-Man 2. But I can't even play that game due to the lack of owning the 5G tower. So the last game that I was hyped for that I could actually play was Tears of the Kingdom. If I were to really sit here and try to think of anything I was seriously anticipating after those two games, it had to be the new Lethal Company update.
And that was just an update! But I was also excited for Mario RPG, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, and the Thousand Year Door remake. But do you see an issue with those games? These are all games that I could play elsewhere, or that I have played elsewhere. What about all the new and original titles, the stuff I haven't seen before? Well, they're all being ruined by random updates and publisher greed.
It seems like nowadays throughout a game's life, there's either a downloadable update that makes the game unplayable, sometimes literally for certain countries, or the base game holds almost zero value in the attempt to coerce people with set updates that makes the game just a little bit better, but not by much. It's like there's a carrot on the stick being held in front of my face, but the carrot is a promise of a good game. I've become the sucker for following it and knowing damn well it leads to just disappointment. Nintendo Switch Sports, Helldivers 2, any recent Mario Sport game have all been affected by this sort of plague. With Switch Sports, there was a lack of great content, and stuff did get added later, but it wasn't enough to keep the game alive. It's the same deal with the Mario Sports games, except those are even more bare-boned and get tossed away even more quickly. With Helldivers, man, that was just depressing. Arrowhead Game Studios made a beautiful game that was unanimously loved just for Sony to block it behind their own terrible network that A, isn't available in most countries, and B, gets hacked like every other week.
AAA gaming, no matter who you're buying from, has become just so upsetting. You either got games with no content at launch, games that were rushed or ruined by updates, or just simply no games worth buying, period. Xbox, come on.
With Xbox, it's especially sad. They'll buy out companies to get us really excited for what they can offer, just for them to shut them down 2 years later. I remember when they used to be actual competition, but when was the last time you heard someone praise Xbox? And I follow Indie Jacob on Twitter. I thought their buyout of Bethesda would give them some, if not all, the competition to work with. Starfield was looking to be top-notch. Oh. Well, at least they have Game Pass. It's a very worthwhile service that gives you access to hundreds of games at a decent price. You know how Netflix was really good in the early days of streaming movies? That's what Game Pass is like for gaming, only it's still kind of a hard sell. There's a lot less flexibility with Game Pass. You don't own any of these games, and you can't use them outside of the service, which, yeah, you can make the same argument for movies, but watching a movie and playing a game are two very different things. A movie could be 3 to 4 hours maximum. Meanwhile, games are hundreds of hours. What if mid-game you don't want to pay for the service, but you still want to play that game with all your saved data?
At that point, you'd feel like this. That's right. Stuck to keep paying for that service until you finish the game. But that also gives you this sense of, well, I pay monthly for this thing, so if I don't finish the game, I'm actively wasting money. And that causes you to maybe rush through your gaming experience.
And it's kind of depressing, almost as if you've lost the ability to put down a game and then later in your life pick it back up right then and there. As by the time you pay 5 months for the service, you've paid the equivalent cost of one game. So at that point, why not buy the 100+ hour game outright? And at that point, you just get to own it. But I understand that point is very niche and very flawed. 5 months to pay for one game isn't true when there's like 100 on the service. But how often are you switching between games, playing smaller titles, or even the indie games? Are you even playing it on the Xbox, or are you playing it on PC or any other supported device, as the service offers different titles across each device? It's very much a case-by-case basis if the service is even worth it, and so far, I have yet to find a reason personally to buy it. But then again, I also don't have the mini fridge I can use it on.
It's been like 4 years since the next-gen consoles came came out, and it's a shame that we still have to call them next gen because of the lack of content. At least Xbox can say with confidence that there is content for their system thanks to Game Pass, but maybe it's too much content. I know a lot that is on there is just shovelware, and developers that have games on that service aren't being paid too well because streaming is so complicated when it comes to the royalties. But again, at least there's content on there. PlayStation, on the other hand,
4 years and only 7 exclusives for the console.
they haven't even reached double digits!
What's even the point of getting a PlayStation 5? Is it the status? Is it the improvement in performance on older titles? Is it the promise of getting more games? Because at that point, it doesn't even happen. Why is it that this Wi-Fi router of a console gets a redesign before it gets any more memorable games to it? Well, a big reason is because of the fact that Sony doesn't find value in funding smaller budgeted games. Do you know what small budget is to them?
Anything below $100 million! And by my calculations, that's more than 6! It's already crazy seeing movies hike up to that kind of price point, but video games? Really? Where's that money even going to? Because at least the films have overpriced A-list actors in them.
You can't tell me that mocap and voice actors are peeing in bottles to save time for the amount of hours they show up late to set. Sony's mindset to high-budgeted games is very fundamentally flawed, because the more money it takes to produce the product, the more money you're gonna need to make in order to profit in the first place. Now, this would make sense if we were in the later stages of the PS5's life and there were so many games for the players to play. So the quality of these later releases would have to be high in order to encourage the player to buy them. Again, only 7 exclusives. And this isn't even stating the fact that Sony has put a decent amount into the PC market. High-selling games have been put on the PC, and a lot of those games were supposed to be PS5 exclusives!
Sony, come on! I want to buy your console! But even with their PC adventures, they failed to realize why people might gravitate towards that platform more. There's less restriction, more freedom, more democracy! Until there isn't.
Helldivers who?
Wait, what? Who's clapping? No, don't clap. That wasn't even that good. No, stop. Yeah, Sony published Helldivers 2, and it garnered massive success because, you know, it's a good fucking game. Just for Sony to change its own policies in order to try and collect more data from a success they really had no part in helping with. Sony wanted this game to require a sign-in to their PlayStation Network, which is a paid online service that PC owners don't want to pay for since multiplayer on PC has always been free. Sony did publish the game so they can make that decision. It just doesn't mean it's a good one. To fuck players over by locking them behind a service they don't need for any other game on the platform was only ever going to upset them. The game got review bombed as an outcry towards this terrible decision. Not only was it an inconvenience, but a lot of countries don't have the PlayStation Network to sign into, meaning the game would have been locked out of those regions after people bought it there. Thankfully, the outcry worked, but this should have never happened in the first place.
As with every toe dip into a terrible business practice, that means the company will eventually fully plunge into it at some point. Who's to say that in the future, Sony doesn't just require this straight up at launch now, because God forbid there's another hit title. We don't want to miss out on that juicy player data. And if I'll be honest, this probably wouldn't have happened if more people had a PS5, so the player base there could just stick with PSN. But most people don't have a PS5 because there's no games for it!
Remember when Nintendo became the meme of the Switch has no games? Yeah, that's literally the PS5, but actually true this time. But while the Switch does indeed have games, it's not safe from contributing its own fair share of staleness. Like I mentioned earlier, the idea of releasing an unfinished game to patch with updates stemmed from Nintendo. Half the time, these games that were being released felt more like demos than full-on releases, and it really stained the quality expected from the one company that seemed to strive for that quality. It more so happened when they would publish a game rather than develop one in-house, but it doesn't take away from the fact that buying Switch games became a gamble. It was to the point where I personally didn't buy any more side series of games, as I've been burnt in the past and refused to let it happen again.
I rubbed some anti-burn on my skin, now I can just be on fire without getting burnt. Now, what I just mentioned hasn't really happened in a while, but it's good to remember that it did, so when it happens again, we can rightfully tell Nintendo, hey! Fucking stop it! Recently, what Nintendo has been doing is blue-balling the fuck out of fans with constant remakes or re-releases of older games.
I mean, we finally got the acknowledgement that the Switch 2 does exist. But the problem with the end of the Switch's life is just the abundance of older titles being put onto it as if they're new. Now, I don't hate a remake or even a remaster, but 4 in a row starts to feel kind of slimy. And Nintendo isn't really one to do something like this super often. As much as I'd love to play these games again, and I'm happy that they're being offered on a more accessible system, I've just already played these games, and heck, some of them aren't even that different looking. What's the point in that case? I know the 3DS had a similar lineup, but that was still being supported 2 years into the Switch's life. We just have the Switch now, and nothing else, since Nintendo likes to decommission old consoles now.
Rest in peace, my beloved.
So with that, it makes the reusing of content much more prevalent than with the end of the 3DS era, because at least there, it felt like a side dish and not the main dish. Meanwhile, here's our entire entree for the Switch. Oddly, all Mario 2. We might get another Metroid remaster or even a Zelda remaster, but then again, if we did get those, who's to say the prices of those would be reasonable? I understand the cost of making games combats that of a rich person's t-shirt, but $60 for a remaster is insane. I remember when Tears of the Kingdom was announced to be $70, it felt kinda off. However, that was justified due to the sheer amount of content within the game. Other games, however, I cannot agree with this kind of price point. New games that are $70 or even $80 just have not justified this price point at all, and it seems like it's only going up from here.
F it! Who needs food when I can eat next month? It's not like there are any games coming out for the PS5!
It wouldn't be that crazy if the games that were priced this way were offering that value, but a lot of them just don't. They just do it because they can. And game companies talk as if they're going to continue to increase this, but not touch upon what they'll do to ensure that these prices are justified. What's even more baffling is the transactions they'll put in the game as well. It seems like single-player experiences become live service games, and with that comes spending more money for content that should have been free within the game in the first place. So it's no longer just spending one price and then having the video game. Sometimes it will cost over $100 just for one game, and you may or may not enjoy that game. That's a very tall order. It's why gaming nowadays just doesn't feel so good. The games we do get are overpriced, over-budgeted, rushed to completion, and when that does come out finally, there's sometimes months or years you get another game for the $500 system you bought as an investment in long-term entertainment. And even when a game does do super well, the studio that made it isn't safe from the constant layoffs and downsizing. Game companies are doing anything to save a buck, and it's affecting both developers and the consumer. I remember growing up being able to buy both used and new games, getting a ton of different experiences because this game was the one I wanted, but this game was $5, so I had to get it. Nowadays, you'd be lucky to find any pre-owned, cheap, good quality games. They've seemed to fizzle out, and if you do find them, it's not a good bargain as they used to be. Plus, it's just more convenient to buy a game at full price online or digitally, and game companies have been aware of this. I can't remember the last time, as a collective, we've all celebrated gaming. I feel like I see so much more negative experience than I do with positive ones. And if there is a positive game or a positive experience, well then the talk about it is so minimal. But it becomes easy to focus on the negative. I mean, I spent this whole time doing just that. A lot of stuff that I actually like about modern gaming are its accessibility, the improvement in performance, the absolute scale in which games are at now. But with each of those positives, I find trends that these companies stick to that ultimately turn sour once I've seen it like a dozen times. Do we still need realism in games? Does every game have to be open world and almost a terabyte in size? Do we need these games to run at 4K 120 frames at all times? Or we can scale a bit back and focus on the experience of playing a game rather than the spectacle of it. Wait, but that won't make any money, will it? I hereby lock the rest of my videos behind a paywall for maximum profit. Okay, well, that's different.